With the 2021-22 season now in full swing, fans of the NBA have been glued to their screens. But with so much going on in the new year, it can be pretty difficult to stay up to date. Luckily for you, though, we've got your back by covering the latest in NBA news. So what are the headlines you should be paying attention to right now, and what does this mean for the season ahead? Well, let's start by taking a look at the record that was just broken by Josh Giddey. Now known by all as the Awesome Aussie, the 19-year-old Oklahoma City Thunder point guard went on to become the youngest player to ever score a triple-double, a milestone that eluded him all of last season. For those of you who aren't too big on basketball jargon, a triple-double refers to the situation in which a player has achieved a double-digit total in 3 of the 5 statistical categories counted during a game. The categories counted in the roundup include assists, blocks, points, rebounds, and, of course, steals. And at the age of just 19 years and 84 days, Giddey raised the bar by having one of his greatest games of all time against the Dallas Mavericks. This was, however, not enough to secure his team a win, who still lost against the Mavericks by a total of 95-86. A real bittersweet ending for Giddey, who was able to obtain double digits in the categories of points with 17, rebounds with 13, and assists with 14. Suffice to say, the Thunder would have been absolutely lost without the Awesome Aussie on the court. This means that the record is no longer held by LaMelo Ball of the Charlotte Hornets, who clutched the record last season when he was just 19 years and 140 days old. But this wasn't the only reason why Thunder fans were so impressed by Giddey. The man also tied the NBA assist record for teenagers, which he would have broken if Andrew Wiggins had made that elusive dunk. Despite the loss of the Thunder that night, social media was abuzz with compliments. And this had a lot to do with how Giddey was previously out of action due to COVID-19 protocols. For those of you who didn't know, Giddey was one of 5 Thunder players previously left out of the team because of a coronavirus concern. Despite the massive surge in positive cases, the NBA has been criticized for reducing the quarantine time for affected players from 10 to 6 days, so long as those players have been vaccinated. This meant that Giddey was able to come back for the match against the Dallas Mavericks. And it's a good thing too, as otherwise he would have missed out on this momentous occasion. As you can imagine, the world of basketball was more than impressed by this comeback, with the commentating team immediately congratulating Giddey by saying that he's worked hard in a lot of different areas just to get that right. It wasn't just the commentators who were impressed though. Twitter was rushed by a number of positive remarks, some of which refer to the Australian native as one of the best teenagers in the league right now. But it sounds like Giddey is less concerned with his statistics and more concerned with where his team is at the moment. When asked about his impressive game, he said that numbers matter a lot less than the actual result. So it looks like the rest of Oklahoma are going to have to play catch-up with the new icon. Speaking of fantastic moments, what about that finisher from RJ Barrett? For many in the crowd, the Boston Celtics were ahead of the game that evening, leaving the New York Knicks down in the dust with just a few minutes to go. But then the Knicks decided to light a fire for the first time this season, decreasing their deficit of 25 points with every passing second. This masterclass on the court was then finished in one of the greatest ways possible. We are, of course, referring to the moment when RJ Barrett made an improbable three-pointer with no time left on the clock. As he released the ball from his hands, the clock ticked over, but since the ball was already in the air, Knicks fans held their collective breaths as time began to slow. And when the ball finally edges its way through the basket, causing the Knicks to win with a score of 108-105, Madison Square Garden erupted into madness. The true credit for the victory didn't go to Barrett, though, despite how fantastic this last buzzer-defying shot was. It was actually Evan Fournier who did most of the work. And this is pretty ironic considering how Fournier was actually traded to the Knicks by the Celtics last season. He absolutely ruled Boston with 32 points per game, which qualified him as the top scorer of the match. In other words, it sounds like New York is finally reaching the status it should have achieved a few seasons ago, and it's all thanks to team cohesiveness. In other news, Lil Wayne has made headlines by predicting the 2022 NBA Finals. Fans of the New Orleans-based rapper know that he has an affinity for sports, and as it turns out, the R&B icon has some stellar predictions when it comes to the Super Bowl and NBA finisher that's coming in 2022. And considering how the biggest sporting event in the history of the United States is expected to be held at the SoFi Stadium in California this year, despite backlash due to COVID-19 restrictions, it's about time we heard some good news. So leave it to Lil Wayne to calm things down with some predictions for us all to discuss. Although he's a massive fan of the Green Bay Packers, the rapper predicted that the Super Bowl will be taking place in Los Angeles, like previous headlines have suggested, but refused to say who he believes will be making it to the game. His prediction for the 2022 NBA finisher was a lot more decisive, though. He went on to say that he obviously wants his team, the Los Angeles Lakers, to make it to the finals, but that is somewhat of a long shot considering how the team has been playing in the last few games. In the Eastern Conference, it looks like Lil Wayne's money will be on Milwaukee facing off against Brooklyn. And when it comes to the Western Conference, the Grizzlies and Suns have his pick. Not too bad if we do say so ourselves. We'll just have to stay tuned to see if he's right. Rudy Gobert has also made news once more more because of his COVID-19 antics. It seems like a decade ago when Rudy Gobert made fun of the coronavirus pandemic by jokingly touching all the recording equipment in front of him and spreading his germs at the post-game press conference. As it turns out, this happened just 1 year and 10 months ago, and since the French center of the Utah Jazz was later confirmed to be positive for COVID-19, the league decided to suspend the NBA season for safety reasons. Now, you'd think that Gobert would have learned something from this embarrassing little moment, but as it turns out, he hasn't been as careful as you think. News has just broke out that Gobert has now been confirmed positive for COVID-19 once more, and the media are no doubt hiding their mics as a result. According to the latest in safety protocols, the Jazz will now be without their top scorer for around a week, giving the star ample time to rest and get rid of the virus before heading back to the court. That being said, he's not the only player missing for the team at the moment. In the latest injury report from the Jazz, Joe Ingles has also been confirmed as being out for the same reason, citing health and safety protocols, which is code for a positive test. This isn't great news for Utah, who are currently sitting third in the Western Conference and are on an active 10-game winning streak. In fact, this streak might be nearing its end. Lastly, LeBron James has spoken up about Glenn Consor's latest remarks, and as it turns out, he isn't the only one. For those of you who don't know, the Wizards commentator made a pretty insensitive remark on Wednesday night in the game between Washington and Houston. It all started when Kevin Porter Jr. dribbled up the court with confidence and nailed a fantastic three-pointer, beating the buzzer and winning the game for the Rockets. This resulted in Consor remarking that Kevin Porter Jr., like his dad, pulled that trigger right at the right time. Sounds innocent enough until you hear that his father, Brian Kevin Porter Sr., pleaded guilty in 1993 to first-degree manslaughter in the shooting death of a 14-year-old girl. In the words of LeBron James, the commentator could have made a mistake, but in our job in our field as professionals, he said, you gotta do your due diligence. Suffice to say, Consor's in some deep trouble. And there you have it, all the NBA headlines you need to be keeping track of right now. What do you think of what Consor said, though? And should we be expecting more from Giddey in the future? Feel free to let us know in the comment section down below.